Welcome to the Final Furlong podcast. I'm Ms. Kennedy. It is great to be joined by a leading racehorse owner, a man who is very passionate about this sport, some wonderful successes, quite outspoken, never afraid to share his opinion, and he's got a leading contender for the Cheltenham Festival who is currently a very, very big price. Carl Hinchy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Emmett. Lovely to be here. Nice to see you.
The horse I really want to start with is the terrific run from Fugitive. I should say he was behind John Bunn, but really was behind Elixir the Nuts. That distance of, first of all, that was an insane running of the Clarence House Chase at Cheltenham. It was a fantastic renewal. The thought process of going for that race with Fugitive, because that distance is too short for him, but he's run a blinder for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our point of view, we started the season, we really wanted to win one of those big handicap races. We'd been second in 3 of them last year, the festival, but over on Trials Day. And look, that was the sort of nut that we wanted to crack. So by doing that, which we did in December, we can then turn our attention to, well, where do we go in the spring? And our view was, look, we've got a horse here that he can really enjoy running over that new course. You know, it's the perfect track for him. He runs it very, very well. If he's shown he can run within £10 possibly of a winning Grade 1 result. So if we can sort of improve ourselves by £3, £4, £5, we're going to be in the first 3 on historical data in the Ryanair. So our attentions then have to turn to, okay, well, what's the best prep for us to give our horse? And we looked at the Lingfield race. We weren't sure that the course would suit him. We looked at the Dublin Racing Festival, a 2 mile 5 handicap. But obviously, he's only trained 20 miles away from the course. So running back there over the course of the distance seemed the obvious point. But then when the Clarence House was rescheduled, it sort of gave us a little bit of food for thought. So when we regrouped and sat down and spoke about how best to prep him, we thought, well, do we carry 12 stone in a handicap and try and do what we've already achieved this season? Or do we look at a slightly different way of treating the horse? We can run him over half a mile less, we can sharpen up his jumping over 2 miles, and we can give him a different experience so he doesn't get into the mindset of, I'm only doing a certain thing all the time. So we weren't gullible enough to think that we were going to beat a horse like John Bunn or anything else. We put a lot of thought into it, but we've been training the horse just with the spring in mind. We've had a bit of moody weather, haven't we, in England over the periods coming up to the race, and our thinking was, let's sharpen him up, let's get him back down to 2 miles. Let's get him out of his comfort zone and use it as a prep for the Ryanair. And we were delighted with his run. So, I think he's run to 6 lengths off the winner over a trip that he wouldn't enjoy. And he's also sort of had to think twice a little bit and say to himself, okay, well, that was out of my comfort zone a bit. And I think we're now literally, let's say he was 85, 90% on Saturday. We'll get him 100% for the 3rd week in March or the 2nd week in March as it is. I think it's 46 days between Trials Day and the Thursday of the festival. So, we're all about that this year. That's where we're going to go. We came second last year's festival in the handicap. And I think clearly now we're on 157. Are we really likely to want to give a lot of weight away to younger horses and perhaps better handicap horses at the festival? No, there's no need to do that. Let's go for the Grade 1 and see how we get on. And it will be a huge day for all his fans and all the people who come and support him every time he runs with us. And myself and Dr. Hussain, who's the other owner, and we just had a great day out, I think. I'm going to win.
And we'll win. Well, I fancied him when Allaho was still in the race, and now with Allaho gone, I can't believe he's still a 33-1 shot. What was Gavin Sheehan saying to you after the race?
Just that. Yeah, just that. He said he had to give him a little bit of a slap around the back just to focus his mind and concentrate him. And he said that he was out of his comfort zone. I mean, my concern would have been, it's been a while since he's run over 2 miles, and last time he ran over 2 miles, the jockey came off and said he was flat out all the way. And when we did that, it was really a question because we wanted to step him up for the previous year's December Gold Cup. So we sort of went back to doing that. Gav came up, and he was absolutely delighted with him. And it was a difficult time for Gavin because, of course, and for everyone who's at Cheltenham, the preceding race, they'd lost that lovely horse of theirs that won the Hennessy, and Gavin was on board, and of course he has to then pick himself up and come and ride our horse, which it's a huge amount of professionalism on his part to do it so well and to display such a great attitude. And again, that speaks volumes for how racing people are. It's I mean, he would have been devastated, but he wouldn't have seen it. You know, he's put his game head on and got himself into the correct zone mentally, and he's given our horse a great ride again. I mean, we've come tearing down the hill, made up all our ground, and we've shot up the hill. And I don't mind finishing. If I'm six lengths behind John Bon, I'm a happy man.
I would take that going into the Cheltenham Festival. Your form read 6.5 lengths behind John Bon over a trip that's woefully inadequate for him. That's a very, very good prep. I still can't understand why he's the price he is. Can I just ask you to go back to the? I'm almost afraid to ask you this because it must have been a pretty dark day. You've just finished second in the Cheltenham Festival, but you finished second at the Cheltenham Festival, which is the problem. What was that feeling like when John McConnell's Seddon manages to just outbattle you?
Yeah, it's the second time a horse of mine and Richard's have finished second. Chansu Fly came second in the Ultimate Chase. Again, carrying a big weight. And I mean, one of my sons said to me at the time, he said, I was devastated. I was very proud of the horse, but because you want to win, you know, and you're never going to get to the end of your career, your life, and say, well, there's a second prize, there's my second place prize from running at the Cheltenham Festival. So you just want to win, and I think the best way to sum it up was there's a statement which is, show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. and that would embody my feelings on the day. Now look, I would have gone on to everyone else that was there and shook their hands and said congratulations. I know how big it is, how important it is to win. And it was great that the lads who won the race were a syndicate. You know, there were small owners, and the horse had done particularly well. We were giving him a lot of weight that day, and we didn't probably get the run of the race, but we had no excuses. We ran a brilliant race. We were proud. Afterwards, we were celebrating like we won the race. But the truth is, deep inside, you just think to yourself, second. Well, you really do want to win.
if that's how you were feeling, just imagine how Ella McNeil was feeling. Because
that was a difficult one. Really difficult one.
They'd sold Seddon, and Seddon was named after her grandmother. And then she has to sit there and watch him go and win for Galaxy Horse Racing. Ella will be back on the show soon.
I mean, they come back to buy you, but at least we know the McNeils are good people to buy off now.
True. Very true. Although I think they're going to think long and hard about the next horse they sell.
Look, and again, Max, he's another. You know, he's a person who's a wonderful involvement. He interacts brilliantly, doesn't he, with the general public, and someone like him, you would love to see, you know, overachieving in his racing, because he's one of racing's real good guys, isn't he? So, you know, look, I'm sure this season he might have one that gets over the line for them. We'll see. It's we've all sold horses that have gone on to do well. And, you know, you do take it on the chin, but dear me, he would love that, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And I think owners like the McNeils and yourself are great for the sport. Like, you communicate so brilliantly. You're willing to come on shows like this and engage with the fans. And there's an understanding that this is the bridge to get to the fans. Like, this is the thing I love about horse racing. I'm a big football fan. I'm a big Liverpool fan. I'd love to go to Anfield and for a Klopp's, by the way, just devastated that that's happening. But anyway, Xabi Alonso, please come and save us.
The first I ever knew about horse racing was when my granddad used to look after me as a kid. And he would leave me outside this little betting shop while he pops inside to put his Lucky 15 on, or whatever it might be. And I'd look through the door and I'd see all this smokiness and what was going on. And I hear the excitement and people coming out, rubbing their hands. And it attracts you from the base level, doesn't it? And then I think when we were teenage boys, we used to jump over the fence at Liverpool at Aintree and bunk onto the course, get on there and watch these hunter chases and the festival, and all the big horses run, and you were attracted to them, you were amazed by them. It was so different. It was so, the amount of people that follow racing, working class people, betting shop people, they're not represented by the people who are at the upper echelons of racing, but they love it just as much, don't they? It encompasses the full spectrum of society in lots of different ways. And interacting now, I think we touched upon this before, you know, you have different platforms to do it. Twitter is a wonderful platform to be able to do that. You know, you can, and the more owners that do it, the more trainers that do it in a better fashion, the more people will understand different things, understand more feelings, share experiences. You know, look at the wonderful communications and different things that can be done, and you can have nice rows with people as well, which is great. You know, there are so many different aspects to modern day communications which people can embrace. And the more people that do it, the better. I think there are a handful of owners doing it there at the moment, and seeing what they do, seeing how much they enjoy it, it's motivational and inspirational to people who perhaps are on the cusp of getting involved in racing and wonder, is this something I can do or can't do? And there are so many different ways to do it. And from the time my first share was a 1% share on a horse, 2.5%, 5%, maybe a leg. You can go all the way through to owning. With a bit of luck, as your life changes, as you grow older, you might have a little bit more success financially. People can enjoy all of the things that the sport has to offer, and communicating it to other people is highlighting just what can be done and how many different types of people can do it. I think it's breaking down a few of those barriers, Emma. Because there still remains within racing that sort of that little bit of a class barrier, isn't there, or the perception of one. But if you go to a race meeting, you won't see that at all. And that's what you're alluding to. Go to the race meeting, see the jockeys, talk to the trainers, have a pint with them in the bars because they're all there. Some more than others.
Yes. Some maybe even the trainer of a prominent champion hurdle. I drink him under the table, by the way. No problem at all.
Finer wine than the Guinness some of us would be having, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'd be probably sipping on the Clonmel Chardonnay, and he'd be drinking the top shelf finest stuff that there is. But
he'd be in the best bars, that's for sure. But look, it really is it's a multifaceted, it's an engaging sport. It's a sport with a fabulous program, and again, people who are familiar with different types of sports, they wouldn't necessarily understand that racing has that, it has that structure to it. From the young horses to the older horses that have that competition, explaining that to people is a brilliant thing to do. Educating people about what happens, but also just feeling the passion of a winning bet, the passion of going without having a bet, and seeing the celebrations of people who've enjoyed a bit of luck at the races. All of those things, they're incredibly contagious and attractive. And if you're in a position where life at the moment is very tough for a lot of people, happiness is a much more sought after quality than it ever has been. And going to races, it doesn't have to be expensive. I think we're all going to Dublin the weekend. A number of us have booked it. I think there will be tens of thousands coming from the United Kingdom to Dublin to have an Ireland, and Dublin itself and Leopardstown will be filled with a great mix of people from the locals to the people from the UK who've been over there, and everyone will be having a ball. It'd be a brilliant example of how good racing can be.
What do you think it is about the Dublin Racing Festival that has worked so well? Because that's one of the things I'm fascinated by about it. The amount of the British contingent who come over. There's not as many Irish going over for Trials Day as there are British coming over for the Dublin Racing Festival. Why do you think it's so appealing?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. I mean, look, if you are a really established racing fan, then you would say the quality of the racing, the 2 days, and the way that they brought all those big races together over those 2 days is a hugely attractive thing. But from a practical level, the accessibility of it is incredible. I mean, who wouldn't want to go and have 2 nights in Dublin? It's a great place to go. You'll have a great night out. Enjoy the crack, as they would say. We all have a pint of Guinness. So first of all, 2 nights in Dublin is a very attractive thing for everyone to do. You can get from the centre of the town on a tram straight to the racecourse. The bus will pick you up at the tram station. Sends you straight there. You can buy an advance ticket for the 2 days, which nowadays includes a pint. You can even go to Shelbourne on a Saturday night if you want to enjoy it. And you can have a burger, an entrance fee, and a pint for €20 or whatever it might be. So there's so much being offered that would attract people's attention, and it's and I have to say it, the cost of doing all of those things is a lot less than 1 day at the races at the Cheltenham Festival. So you can have airfares on Ryanair. You can have a night in a really nice, 2 nights in a really nice hotel, because when you split the cost between a few lads, it doesn't come down. I mean, last year when we went, I think we paid €280 a head for flights, entrance to races, and hotel accommodation. And that's not bad, is it? For 2 days racing and a nice little weekend away. So it's affordable. And people are biting back a bit, aren't they, at the prices that you're seeing on these big days at English racecourses at the moment. So, but I think all of those things put together, you wouldn't jump out and say, well, it's just the timing of it is great. It just wets the whistle before Cheltenham, doesn't it? And seeing those horses that are going to be running again in 4 or 5 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, it's I think it's got everything for your racing fan, and I am a huge racing fan. That's why any of us are doing it, really.
Come to Dublin for the Dublin Racing Festival. Stay in the city. Sample the nightlife. Maybe the far right will have another extreme riot, and you can get a bit of looting done as well. Insert image of chaos in the streets of Dublin. I think it's calmed down now. I think we're all right. It is interesting to mention Cheltenham because, look, we all love it. We build to it. In a way, there's probably a danger that the Cheltenham Festival is going to consume the National Hunt season, and we're going to have to look at that going forward. But it's the thing we're excited about. But dearie me, it costs a fortune. Even 20 quid a day to park your car, Carl.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I've been going for 30 odd years, at least. I mean, I think this year might be the only year where I don't go for the week. And obviously it's been going that way for a while. And I think you feel like you're getting your pocket picked, don't you? That's the way you would describe it. And you wonder why you feel it's necessary, because I mean, they're clearly going to make an awful lot of money from Cheltenham. It's hugely attended, but it isn't just that. It's the cost of hotels. It's the cost of, like you've just said there, parking your car. I mean, what we do every year at Cheltenham, it's the same every year. We get there early, we go straight to the Guinness tent, and we'll be in the Guinness tent until at least the first race is run. And I tell you what, I mean, nowadays we're gonna have to have a few quid with us just to pay the price of Guinness, aren't we? Will it be hovering around £8 a pint or something on those lines? I live in Spain and I don't pay more than €2 a pint. so for me paying €8 a pint or £8 a pint, it's unsavoury, isn't it?
Hold on a second. We're both in the European Union. You're in Spain. I'm in the Republic of Ireland. How are you getting a pint of Guinness for £8 in a country that it's made here and we're paying way more than that?
Even worse, I'm travelling to your neck of the woods on the weekend to pay £8. The worst thing about Dublin is the way the prices creep up. You can go in a bar at 5 o'clock and it's however many euros, and then at 7 o'clock it goes up €2, and at 9 o'clock it goes up even more. So yeah, it's impossible to even answer that question, isn't it? But certainly the original point you're making is, will racegoers keep putting up with it? Will they keep going? I mean, I, for one, look, I would feel very, very reluctant now to book a place for a week to book. I mean, I will come in and see my horse run on the Thursday, but will I be there on the Tuesday and Wednesday? No. When was the last time I missed the Tuesday and Wednesday? Probably 1991. Wow. I just don't feel that, because of course I'm bringing all my children with me, I'm bringing friends with me. I just don't think that people really want to. They don't want to have that feeling of love. They'll love being there, and it will be full because it attracts a huge press. Well, in fact, it wasn't full last year, was it? Was it the Wednesday when the attendance was pretty poor? They reduced the attendance for Friday, didn't they?
I'm pretty certain the attendance fell on the Wednesday and Thursday combined by 28,000, and they were trying to say, "Oh, it's the rail strikes." It wasn't the rail strike.
No, there's a reason for that. There's a lot of people in the town centre who just go to the bars and won't go on the course. They'll sit and watch on TV. I mean, Cheltenham is absolutely buzzing. Of course, it is that week. But for me, no, it's. I'll be flying in on the Wednesday. I'll come in on Wednesday night, and I'll be racing Thursday. I probably won't even race Friday. So I literally will be going to see my horses here. The first time in as many years as I can imagine. It's a step or two too far, isn't it? Like a lot of these things. I think you've got to treat your core audience with a bit more respect. And I think this also extends to the cost of hospitality. It's very, very hard to work out how it can possibly be as much as it is. It's crazy money.
It's bonkers, and also people aren't stupid. Like, you can try and justify the fact that you've got different events taking place at Cheltenham, like the darts tournament and the snooker tournaments that go on there. Dave Yates was talking about the fact that at the snooker tournament, I think it was January last year, a pint was £6. That same pint was £8 at the Cheltenham Festival.
This is the same venue, isn't it? That's
Very same venue.
Yeah,
Same venue. Yeah. Now, there were people who were trying to justify this with, oh, well, you have to have more staff, and that's all nonsense. And anybody who knows anything about that stuff knows that that's nonsense. The reason you're charging £6 for a pint at a snooker tournament and a darts tournament at the very same venue is because the crowd turning up to the snooker and the darts tournament would laugh in your face if you tried to charge them £8 for a pint. Whereas the racing crowd just seemed to be a little bit more like, Asher, we're here and we'll do it. And you can get away with that to a certain extent, but you push it too far.
Going to Guinness Village at the Cheltenham Festival is part of the experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's what probably and this is probably where it's, I mean, you've touched upon it before. I'm in the Guinness Village for whether it's the November meeting or it's the festival, and I'm chatting to so many different racing people, if you want to call it, the racing fans, but also the trainers, jockeys, all sorts of people. They're all gathered around there. So it's a great place where people want to go and can really enjoy a proper atmosphere of being there. Oof, you know, I mean, do they want to run a chance of ruining that for the next generation of people? Because I can assure you, I have sons who are, 19, 21, 23, 25, 27, that they don't have the money to spend on going to racing for 2 or 3 days or 3 or 4 days, even the one day. When they're paying rounds, there's a round of the 6 or 7 of them, and the rounds are coming to £50. It can be crazy, can't it? It's just normal people. They can't afford that type of thing, and other people think it's outrageous. I'm not paying it. So it is a real shame, because if you're in that bar, you will see that around the back of the bar they have got pre-poured as many pints of Guinness as you can possibly drink, and so there's no shortage of supply. They're sending them out. So I think you can probably afford to chip a little bit off the price, and that would go down well. Be a nice headline, wouldn't it? Dave Yates forces down price of Guinness.
Dave Yates and cravat forces down pints of Guinness. But I mean, Dave is one of the good guys. Like, Dave has been calling this stuff out for quite some time, and I really admire the stance that he's taken on it, because the easiest thing in the world to do is not criticize British racing, not criticize Irish racing, and just shill for the sport. And it's all great, it's fantastic. The hard thing to do is to stand up and say, no, this is wrong.
Racing, in essence, it discourages an opinion, doesn't it? It extends to the broadcasting of racing. If you ask the wrong question to the wrong trainer or the wrong jockey, then will you get asking the question again? The elements of critique, are you allowed, and is it encouraged to provide a proper critique of a race? And you are seeing these barriers getting broken down. I mean, Ruby is incredible with his broadcasting talent, and when you see the way he will, and in racing terms, you would say he would call out a bad ride or something like that. Well, it isn't calling out a bad ride. It's presenting a critique, isn't it? It's explaining, as you say, in football, they pay God knows how many people to comment on what they've seen, and in racing, that really is discouraged. And again, it very much as, I mean, certain trainers might say that owners should be seen and not heard, and again, they're not particularly encouraged to formulate and express an opinion. But if you've been involved in the racing industry at the coalface, so to speak, for 10, 15 years, how much have you got to say? How much have you learned? An awful lot. You have an opinion that's it's an opinion which is brought through experience and what you've seen, what you've done, and all of the different things that perhaps they prefer to lie without really being touched upon. And I think, for me, the more you've touched upon it just then, it's the third biggest sport in the country, attendance-wise, broadcast-wise, the whole thing. Well, let's open it up a little bit. Let's talk about everything that goes on there a bit more. Let's explain rides. Let's criticize rides. Let's talk about why. The more you do in a modern world, the more you express opinions and keep everything away from perhaps dark corners, then the better you have of attracting this so-called new audience that they feel. And I think when they talk about new audience, they're talking about new generations of people to love the sport and to get involved in it. And you have to recognise that new generations do things in a different generational way. They're on podcasts, they're on Twitter, they're on all sorts of different Instagram things and various other things. So the more the sport opens up and engages with those people, then the more it will become popular, surely. It's a no-brainer, really.
I think in terms of punditries and for broadcasters, like mentioning Ruby is a really interesting one because of that fearlessness to criticise. He's not personally attacking Jack Kennedy when he criticised his ride on Jerry Colomb in the Down Royal Champion Chase. He's just pointing out that wasn't Jack Kennedy's best ride and he nearly got him beat. And that will have motivated Jack to make sure that he rides that horse better going forward. And look, Jack Kennedy's probably the best jockey riding on both sides of the RC. The guy's absolutely phenomenal. But Ruby doesn't have that fear because of his status. And what I find interesting about this is, like, I do a lot of work with TalkSport. And I'm very proud that we get to cover horse racing on TalkSport 2 to the extent that we do. But Rory Jennings comes on after me. And oftentimes, if I'm presenting that show, you stay on to do 2 races on the social. And Rory Jennings is getting stuck in criticism to Chelsea players, who he's a big Chelsea fan, but any footballer who didn't pull their socks up that weekend, he will give them both barrels. And he'll call out tactical ineptitude of managers as well, as will a lot of football pundits. Now, if we can get that level of criticism in football, why are we so afraid to do it in horse racing?
And it's a real question, isn't it? It's a real question. I think it's something that, what do you want? You want more people talking about the game. You want more people engaging with the game. And you won't do that if you don't ask questions. You have to, and you touched upon there the fact that, that Jack Kennedy may have really enjoyed listening to that, what you would call criticism. And criticism doesn't mean that you're criticising someone. Criticism is a much broader term, which is offering a critique of what you've seen. But you've got, you have a situation there where there are good and bad elements to it. But the important thing is to allow somebody to speak freely about what they've seen. And that then encourages further debate, further discussion, further argument. And it, more than anything, it educates people. So when you have somebody, how many times over the years have we had prominent ex-jockeys who've been involved in racing, but they're not educating people in the way that Ruby's doing it. He is talking through the race after saying, this is an error that was made, this was a gap that was left. If people had come stand side and said at that moment that you accelerated a little bit too early in the race, you could have saved it. And all of that is educational for the public. And it's not about how people in racing should feel about it, because people in racing is a description that extends to the whole of the racing community, all of the different people that love racing. And for them to be able to hear this incredible critique about a breakdown of a race, how it was run, how it was won, and how it was lost, more importantly, and what could perhaps happen if it was done differently. That's incredibly educational, and it's something that should be promoted and encouraged, because that is the sort of thing that attracts more people and gets more people talking about what they've seen.
I often think there's a fear amongst directors or producers that they don't want an overly complicated view of a race. They want a simplified, dumbed down view. And so those ex-jockeys who come in are almost encouraged to talk down to people, and that can then come across as condescending or patronizing, when in actual fact, we all want to know more. Like, the reason we're watching Road to Cheltenham is because we want that insight from Ruby. We want to know what Lydia thinks about how a certain race was won. The reason you're going after those interviews with various different connections is because you want to know their thoughts. George Gorman said something very, very interesting about your race, John Bond's defeat. Said it wasn't James Bowen giving him a bad ride. It was that John Bond was confused because of how he'd been ridden by Nico. And that Nico rode him very, very differently to the way Aidan Coleman did. Whereas James Bowen's style is very similar to Aidan Coleman's. And that if you change a jockey and ask that horse to do things differently, the horse then becomes confused by it. He's expecting to be forced into a fence. And when he's not being forced into it, he's then prone to make a mistake. Now, that's an opinion that George has expressed as a former jockey on this show. He could be wrong. But it's a fascinating insight that wasn't something I'd thought of. And I thought put a very different perspective on that fight overall.
Yeah, but again, it's a critique, isn't it? And that's the important thing. And you touched upon the analogy with football and other sports, and racing is lagging so far behind through probably constitutional, old-fashioned viewpoints and limits placed on broadcasters, who I'm sure really want to be looking at things in a different way. You really will, just hugely change the face of how it's broadcast and how people engage with the sport if you bring it into line with those modern sports. Talk to all of the participants critique what they do. You know, that there is so much more for racing to give and to discuss and to be heard than what we're seeing at the moment, which is, you know, as shaking it all up and getting it all going and getting people in the modern world interested in the sport. I'd say that was the biggest thing that anybody could do, because of course it does, as I've already touched upon, it encourages debate. People say I'm not having that. That's not right. But when it's being explained to people, then they understand a little bit more about where their money's gone or why they've got money in the pockets and all of those other things. But yeah, perhaps we will see. Perhaps we will see now. Now you've seen how perhaps successfully received it's been. Perhaps you will see a change in that. It's you know, I mean there's a huge amount of openness from trainers, from people that are involved in the sport. So it would be interesting to see, you know, perhaps a much more critical and much more expansive view of how racing works and how races are broken down.
When I was getting into the sport, which would have been the early noughties, I'm so old. I loved Channel 4's coverage. As far as I was concerned, that was the gold standard. They were just absolutely superb, and of course Ted Walsh was a major part of that for the big festivals. But trainers were very apprehensive to share opinions. You could see how guarded they were. And it was really John Gosden and then Aidan O'Brien embracing the media more. Paul Nicholls would have been very good at that too, to be fair. Willie Mullins would have been very guarded in the old days. I think they just were skeptical of what the media, why do you want to ask me a question and how are you going to twist it? I think that's what the trainers and jockeys were fearful.
Very possibly. But and I think from my own experience of coming into the sport as an outsider, I would have experienced that personally. You know, I mean, examples would be, so I'm paying bills and I've got a commercial agreement with someone who's training my horses. You know, I'm not, he's not my family or a friend of mine or whoever it might be. And they would have come, perhaps the more sort of established old-fashioned approach would be, well, the owner just gets told how much we want to tell him, and whether that be about the extent of an injury or why a horse is running or isn't running. And that's the way perhaps things have always been done. But you have a different breed of owner, a different type of person that's involved. Often people that may have been maybe very bright and maybe really keen to learn or interested in what's going on. And I remember I would ring vets, because I would get all my vets' bills, and I'd ring my vets and I'd say, oh, this trainer is telling me this horse has got a sprained ankle. Can you explain to me what this sprained ankle is, and you know, how long will this horse be off for? What's the problem? What's the treatment? And the vets would absolutely be delighted to tell me in exact detail. They would send me copies of scans. They would talk to me about what's happened, the best treatments. Then when the trainer would find out, all hell would break loose. What do you mean you've phoned the vet? What do you mean he's told you that? Because they would have preferred to give you the sprained ankle version of what may have happened. And again, that sort of attitude was embodied in the sport for an awful long time, you know, and arguably it can be hard to shake it off. But you are seeing a much different type of trainer, aren't you? You know, all these incredibly, you know, switched on young trainers that you're seeing nowadays, and even perhaps the older trainers, I think we touched upon before, who aren't quite, you know, as comfortable with today's modern communications as the younger ones are. This is when sometimes they get tripped up because they say the wrong thing, or they say too much, or they say something that everyone knows now and then comes back. We touched upon Constitution Hill as an example, perhaps, with the suggestion that he was going to be a Gold Cup runner, as opposed to, you know, and the backlash from that when he's running in champion hurdles. But so some are good at it, but I think you have to be, if you're going to engage at that level in this type of a sport, with its popularity, with its fan base, the way forward is for people to engage as best they can with communications in a modern world. They all need to come on your show, Emma.
We're happy to have them. We're happy to facilitate all trainers. Paul Nicholls, come on back to the final furlong very soon. You gave an interview to the Racing Post last year, and you said that your fees for the previous year were £121,500, and that the prize money you won was £94,000.
Sure,
that just doesn't. What is your stance on that? That doesn't add up. What is your stance on prize money in British racing and the current state of British racing?
Yeah, I mean, dear me, that's a question for a whole episode in itself, isn't it? I mean, prize money is we're picking up less than we were picking up 20, 30 years ago. It's harder to come by. I won 2 races for me this year. Both races are less than £5,000. How much am I paying a month? Well, it's going to be nudging. It's what vets fees, entry fees. It's £200 for a jockey to ride your horse. It's a very, very expensive business. And I think that people, there's sort of an argument that, well, you don't go into racing thinking that you have to run a profit and loss account. But I think when you've been in racing for a while, you do feel that way. You think to yourself, well, hang on, what level of enjoyment can I get from spending this type of money? And, you will look at it. And I think that the point you're making there, I actually sat down and it's not something I would always have done, but I'd sat down at the end of the season, I would have written down all of my costs, where the prize money's come in, how much I paid in training fees, vets fees, and so forth. And it may even have been worse than you've mentioned then, because I don't think I included losses on horses that I'd purchased. So, will you sustain that over a period? Will people continue to do it? Because one thing, I'm talking to someone who's owned horses now for 12 years individually, large chunks, at least 100% or 50% of horses. And I am at the point where I've significantly watered down my interests to a much smaller number of horses, and even running a few syndicates for people and things like that. And the cost has got a huge bearing in that, because you run out of experiences to have. So you say to yourself, well, look, I love my first Cheltenham winner, I love my first entry winner, I love my first big handicap winner, I've loved my graded winners, I've loved my grade 1 winners. What are you chasing now? What do you want to do now? Do you want to keep on spending that money? And this is another challenge for sport, isn't it? Because how many owners do you see fall away? And what are the reasons for doing it? And obviously, we've seen recently the huge news which has come out of Gordon Elliott there with the Browns. This isn't the first time you've seen it. The Rooneys were huge purchasers of horses not that long ago, and left National Hunt Racing very, very quickly. Why are people? You can see countless people who have been huge in racing and have had horses after horses and success after success, and they've gone, haven't they? They're not there anymore. And they were good people who really enjoyed racing, but no one sort of asks those questions. Why aren't these people involved in racing anymore? Why did they decide to call it a day? Because sure as as you can see, you've just seen these huge purchasers in Ireland who have now sort of walked away from racing, and I don't think, we'll accept their reasoning, but there may be a lot more to it than that, and politically and sensitively they really don't want to say. Who knows? That might well be the case. But Graham Wiley walked away from racing, didn't he? The Sullivans are hugely reduced. There's so many names that you can name and continue to name, and no one sort of says, well, is it almost accepted that people will have a very limited lifespan, that they won't want to really carry on and investing in the sport? So, perhaps talk to those people, perhaps find out from them why it is that for me, I can answer the question very simply. I've got to a point where racing has changed so much over the period that I've been involved in racing. I was buying winning pointers by presenting for €40,000. I graduated from buying those types of horses when prices started doubling, trebling, and so on, to buying horses in the second-hand market, and then buying horses through Richard in France and so on for a lot less money, and challenge myself to see if we can get the same sort of success by carrying on spending those same levels of money. But the platform, the face of racing, the price of everything has been driven up, and the returns haven't been. And from someone like me, I would say what I've been doing, which effectively is punching above your weight in winning and competing at graded level and championship levels and festival levels with horses, it really is going to be very, very hard to achieve that going forward. In today's marketplace. So, do I want to carry on spending lots of money and not getting the same sort of levels of success, and not getting the same rewards through prize money as you were in the past? And then when you bolt onto that, the very important question of, of the political climate and the situation with affordability checks, and being able to have a real good punt on your horse, which was so easy to do if you wind the clock back 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Now it's almost impossible. Maybe you'll find some really good bookmakers who'll lay a bet, but it's hard to even get on a course, So and the exchanges are much the same. So you sort of think, certainly from my point of view, you think, well, the game has changed significantly. Is it saying that it doesn't want people like me, or people who want to try and achieve better things on a more selective budget and so forth? They don't want you to have a bet anymore on your horses, and you look at all that and you say, no, it doesn't have a future, does it? It doesn't have that same appeal, and I think. So again, speaking specifically from my point of view, I feel I've achieved pretty much everything I ever wanted to achieve. In fact, a lot more than I ever felt I could achieve. So for me to carry on in racing in the long term is what am I chasing? I'm not really chasing anything. I've done most things, so I'm enjoying, on a much smaller scale what I'm doing, and going forward. I don't. You can't sort of persuade people with reasonable intelligence. You can't give them a very, very compelling reason to get involved in ownership of horse racing, can you? Some people with huge amounts of money, but even then, I feel there's no one who really sort of offers guidance and experience. There's no one with an experienced tale to tell who could perhaps warn other owners of the pitfalls of being involved in the racehorse owners association. Don't do it, do they? They don't say, well, hang on, just be careful. How much have you got to spend? Maybe you'd be better spending it wisely. What about spending it with this person, that person? Because you see a lot of people who come in, whoosh, great big spend, disappeared. They had no success at all. They never even got to have, the wonderful experiences that they could have had. They sort of walk away from racing thinking, well, that left a great big hole in my bank balance, didn't it? And I didn't really have anything positive on the back of it. So, yeah, there's. I wouldn't like to sort of leave the conversation on a negative point. I'm talking personally about my own experiences, and they will be the incredible highs, experiences, people I've met, not just within racing, whether it be jockeys or trainers or administrators. All of the people that I've met who are fans of racing, we've engaged with, spoke to, had drinks in bars with, spoke to in betting shops, bumped to into village streets and all the rest of it. My experiences have been overwhelmingly positive. I'm a massive racing fan, and I feel incredibly privileged to have sort of lived that through those experiences and then have achieved and done what I've done. But so it's a positive message that you'd send out there. You can't have a discussion on this, can you, without touching upon the obvious, the obvious pitfalls, the obvious negative aspects of why racing has turned out the way it has, and why there's no proper reward for people who are spending their money doing it. Any sort of pro rata, sensible, argument that you can say to somebody, basically you're telling people to lose lots of money, and intelligent people, whatever their spirit is and whatever they will get to a point where they say, I've not really enjoyed that. I could have bought a villa in Spain, or I could have bought have a nice boat in the marina, or I could have travelled the world. All the different things and possibilities that are open to people. So yeah, I accept that's a bit of a mixed message, but it serves you right for asking the question, doesn't it?
Well, we embrace openness on the Final Furlong podcast. How do you make a small fortune out of racing? Start with the big one.
Yeah, start with the big one.
As part of that, you did say, does British racing want me? Like, have you ever asked yourself that question? Is that something you've actually felt?
Look, I think there are certain elements of. I have been incredibly well treated by organisations like the Jockey Club. Who are the people who are head of racing in my local tracks have been brilliant and have invited me to fantastic events and always welcome me on the course. So look, course, those people themselves, that statement would not extend to those types of people. They've been great. They've been, look, we weren't born in the Cotswolds from very, very wonderful, eccentric, gentrified families. We're northern people who my parents, none of my parents have ever owned a home, before we were there. So we are coming from a different sort of perspective, and we've been warmly welcomed to an awful lot of these types of things. What I would say is, from a perspective of finance, from a perspective of,
that's the BHA coming to shut you up.
That's what it is. They're pretty efficient at that.
Like, cut him off.
Well, I think what you would say is just that, wouldn't you? Because you see the game changing an awful lot, and you think, and it goes back to the point I made half an hour ago, wherever it was, when I first expressed an interest in racing, first was going to the races. All of the people I was chatting to there, they all had a little toenail of some description, didn't they? In the horses, or it was a community. It was much more deep rooted in perhaps the working class, which is something that the National Hunt Racing, quite conversely to the people who run it, it's always been a working man's sport. From the great Irish people who come over to Cheltenham every year, to the people from Scotland and from the north of England and from all over that travel to watch the racing. And so you sort of say to yourself, well, those people, they're the fabric of the backbone of racing, aren't they? And you've got to have room within the racing community for the smaller level entrance level at the highest level as well. And again, we touched upon the horse that beat us. So we first and second at the Cheltenham Festival last year. Neither of those horses cost more than £40,000. You can do it, can't you? And I think the point I was making there was it's becoming very, very hard to do, because you can't justify to your family, to your own sense of financial competence. Can you keep on spending this type of money? And what is your risk and reward, and what is your what? Because much as I've said before, once you have experienced the great things that racing's got to offer, you do want to carry on doing it, but it gets to a point where your logic kicks in and common sense kicks in, and you get grouchy or upset about racing for £2,500, don't you? And whatever it might be. So I think anyone with any sense would say that racing isn't really appealing, is it, to the masses?
You've talked about affordability checks. You actually talked about quitting the sport because of them. You're a hugely successful bettor. You obviously like to have a bet. How much of a concern are affordability checks to you? Not only the restrictions being imposed on people's freedom to be able to do what they choose to do with their own money, but also the damage that it can do to the sport, given the fact that horse racing is mainly funded by the levy.
Yeah, and I mean, just touching upon that, I gave an interview to the Racing Post, which was a general interview about my involvement in racing and where I was going and why I wasn't particularly, downsizing is probably the best way to describe it. But at the time, they were running affordability check headlines, so the headline was "Quits racing because of affordability." There's a whole series of things, and as you can see, I haven't quit. I'm still enjoying racing on a small scale with some nice horses. But to answer your question, I mean, on so many levels, everything about it is wrong. And you do not vote people into power to restrict your civil liberties. I don't want to go too political on this, but the people in Parliament have been voted there by the people of this country. And for them to say that they have an agenda to restrict the freedoms of what people can and can't spend their money on is absolutely outrageous. And it's extending to other things, whether it be the sweet smoking cigarettes, smoking vapes, various other things. But the percentage of people that enjoy the freedom to spend an element of their wages on betting or whatever it might be, that it's a God-given right to do whatever you choose to do with the money that you've earned for yourself, and you should not have any, even the tiniest. Nobody should have or think they should have the power to restrict your ability to do that. So that would be my very, very firm thoughts on the principle of this. But also I think that again, and racing seems to have woken up to this quite late in the day. But the effect on the levy, the effect on the funds that will go into racing will be equally, it could be devastating, because the long and short of it is that you need the largest amount possible to be traded, because of the way that racing is funded and the racing is set up. You need the biggest amount and that amount of money is going to be significantly impeded upon, because whether it's people who are using different types of bookies, people who are going abroad for bookies, people who are going to the black market for bookies, all of those different things, that money is not going into the levy. And when it doesn't go into the levy, there will be a huge drop. And if there's a huge drop, well, how is racing going to be funded under its current model? And again, it's so simple to see the potential damage to the sport. It doesn't even really need discussing, does it? It's incredible that people will say that you're going to bring in a policy which is going to be so damaging to the third biggest sport in the country, and that policy is based upon an ill-informed judgment that you have the right to tell people what they can and can't do with their money. And I'm sorry, I have every sympathy for people who have health problems of any type of description. But I think hanging the hat on the suggestion that the compulsive gamblers, the people that there's a terrible amount of harm. I mean that level of harm, it has to be proportionate in some way, and it really isn't. And I'm not expressing a lack of sympathy for people in those positions, but there are people who have all sorts of problems all over, and there are different ways to solve those problems. Impeding other people's ability to freely go about their business isn't the right way to look at solving those types of problems. So, and I think the corporations who are running the big business, the large bookmakers, that they have been changing the way that they operate now for a number of years. And obviously in reaction to large fines and various other things that they've had to deal with, and judgments that have been made in the courts. So the introduction of this isn't a new thing. It's become very, very difficult to bet freely for a long time now. But I wouldn't be talking about perhaps people who are betting in larger volumes, like perhaps myself and so forth. It's my taxi driver friend who can't get his bet on, who puts a £50, £25 each way bet on, and they tell him that they're closing his account before the bet has even run, because they say they've done a credit check on him, and it says, well, he's a pensioner. He's a pensioner, and he runs taxis as a side business. He hasn't got lots of historical accounts to fall back on. But it's not for them to tell him what he can do when he's 70 odd years old, but he's been doing it since he was 16. How he has to change his life. It's incredible that people feel that they have that gift. It's empowering, and it's more. I'm afraid it's just more madness when you look at policy and how people feel that they have the right to tell people how they should or shouldn't live their lives. I think again, I could talk about this for some time, but you just have to. At the moment, they're saying. You've seen this with lots of policy with governments over the years, but they're now saying that people want checks to be frictionless. They don't want checks. They do not want checks. It's not. First of all, we know that there's no such thing as frictionless checks, but they don't want checks at all. Let's not change the rhetoric on it as though somebody has suddenly accepted that any of this is acceptable, because it isn't. It genuinely isn't. So yeah, it's. I think again. Let's say I was 18, 19, 20 moving forward. I wouldn't be encouraged, would I, to be engaging in this sport from a betting perspective, because I wouldn't be allowed to do it.
But you're referring to comments made by the new CEO of the Betting and Gaming Council, who decided to come out with this quote about how punters want frictionless checks. I'm looking forward to seeing what Michael can do in that position, and I'd like to think that he will show strong leadership. That worries me, because that is a disingenuous line. That's twisting what has been said. Nobody who has been fighting against this, and there have been a number of bettors who have put themselves in the position to fight on the front lines of this, way more than the British Horse Racing Authority have, and this is the very existence of British racing that is being fought for. It is deeply frustrating to be told that a sitting MP advise the board of the BHA, you must speak out about the affordability checks, and before the gambling white paper is even published, you must have an opposition to this before it's published, because once it is, you can't undo it. And they went, nah, it'll be fine. Nah, it'll be fine. Like, that kind of thing is very galling, and I really applaud. I really applaud Nevin Truesdale and the team at the Jockey Club who came up with that petition, and for the criticism that there was of it. That criticism was way out of pocket. That's one of the fastest petitions to ever reach 100,000 signatures. This is a fight for the survival of British racing, and it's worrying. It's worrying when the rhetoric is being changed like that. Like, who are you servicing? Because you're not fighting for us.
No, I mean, in political terms, this is what you see an awful lot of the time. So that there is an approach, and I think a lot of the problem here is that people aren't really used to seeing how politics works and how arguments are made and so forth. And someone may have said to this chap, who knows, they may have said, look, this is coming through. The best way of arguing this point is to go on a frictionless argument, or to go on this argument, because you will get some return off that point. Look, I don't have any inside knowledge on that, but my experience in life in general, and particularly in that political end, it often shows that if they are arguing that, you can't it'd be wrong to suggest that these people are absolutely clueless, because if they are, we are in real trouble. So I would perhaps take something along those lines out of it. But I just don't know. I mean, my experience in other walks of life is that once they've made these decisions, they just push them through, and they really don't listen to the noise that's going on around them. So let's hope the noise is loud enough, and particularly maybe we have an election before any of this comes through and the whole thing disappears. That would be my biggest hope. Let's hear from the opposition. Let's see if they're prepared to run alongside the BHA and all the people that are important to racing and the industry as a whole, and say that if they're successful, obviously in a general election, they will not be bringing this nonsense in. That would be the best thing for them to come out of it.
In the era of the super trainer, where Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott are dominating the Cheltenham Festival, where Paul Nicholls is training big winners and Nicky Henderson winning the big Saturday races in the UK, what is the attraction for you as an owner of having horses in training with Richard Hobson?
Well, there are so many attractions. I mean, again, I think when you go into horse ownership, you go there with your eyes wide open. You're very inexperienced. You really don't know a great deal about what happens in yards and how they do it and so forth. But if you're in it for the period of time that I've been in it, and you're unable to have learned an awful lot about it, then you've not been engaging properly with the sport and seeing how things work and so forth. So I've been in yards that have had 100 horses. I've been in yards that have 70 horses, 60 horses. I've seen the way they're cared for, how people can struggle to certainly, obviously, with staffing and all the other things, it's almost impossible situation to have huge amounts of horses and look after them as well as they possibly can be. So for me, from all of the things that I've learned over the years, when I'm looking at a trainer, first and foremost, I want someone who cares for horses. I want someone who's a horseman through and through. I've reduced my training, the people who train for me, really to Richard and to Christian Williams over the last few years, both of whom would be described as total horsemen. They know every inch of a horse. They know, and more importantly, and certainly you asked me about Richard, so I'll talk about him. Richard is incredibly dedicated. He's obsessive in his detail. He knows every inch of every horse. He only has 12, 14 horses, and the care that those horses get and the condition that those horses are produced in, day in, day out, he knows every single thing about every one of them. The veterinary care is superb. So if I'm looking at a horse and I want to get the absolute maximum best out of them, then that's how I would like a horse to be cared for. And I also, because of the way I like to do things, good communication is incredibly important. So I need to have someone who's able to discuss with me how a horse should run, where it should be running, where we think we should go, how we should plan out a season, whether we should overface a horse, how if we have Fugitive's a perfect example, a great big horse, let's not do too much with him when he's younger. We know he's going to be a chaser. Let's get this horse to fulfill all of his potential. And Richard is someone who consistently does that. He manages to get horses to overachieve rather than to, and the amount of injuries these horses get are very, very, very small. You know, you have complete trust in the job that they do. So there's no lies, there's no nonsense, the horses are being cared for incredibly well. You can go into that yard, it's immaculate. The skin on all the horses is incredible, and you're giving yourself half a chance. And don't forget, Richard's, for me, he's trained multiple graded winners, multiple listed winners, inexpensive horses. He's consistently done it with very, very few horses, and certainly with no large investment into his yard. He'd be very happy if someone came along and said, "Here's £500,000 to spend." But he's just an outstanding. He's an outstanding individual. He's an outstanding trainer, and I think, I wouldn't swap him for any of those people who are training hundreds of horses. I think he's at least their equal, and if not an awful lot better. There's a ring
mutual. Oh, absolutely. He's going to be putting that on his bio on the website now, because our mutual friend Ross Millar has chosen. Our mutual friend Ross Millar has chosen him to be the trainer of the hopefully the great Roger. We've already seen some training videos of him.
That's true, yeah.
But he was talking about the level of fitness that Richard is able to attain with his horses, and how he prepares his horses very differently to someone like back in the day, Martin Pipe, for example, when it was all about stripping them down and having them lean, mean, and ready to go. And he could get those horses to race consistently, but maybe the longevity of their careers wasn't quite there with some of the top horses that he had. Whereas Richard's level of fitness just seems to be very, very different. It was really intriguing to hear that aspect of things, but how each trainer will approach things very differently. But the fitness level that Richard's horses seem to be a little bit more bulky. They're able to pile on that little bit more muscle.
And
maybe they take the racing.
You used to see that. You used to see that in the old days, didn't you? With horses, they looked strong as bulls, didn't they, rather than lean and super fit. And yeah, I mean, I think as much as I touched upon before, the skin on the horses is incredible. I mean, even in the middle of winter when you shouldn't be looking like that. But if you send a horse into Richard's yard and then you look at him on the day he's arrived, and you look at him 2 years later, you'll see a completely different horse. The top line, the bulk out in all the right places, the everything that they're given and how they're treated. They're all out having picks of grass. They're all getting the best vitamins. They're getting everything, every little need that they have, whether it be having their backs shocked, whether it be having. And also having them trained in a sensitive fashion. They're going up. They're not rushed to do things too soon, which you often see. And also, I think more importantly, how well horses are checked and looked after. Not only how they're fed, but if in a great big yard, you might not spot, might you, the beginnings of a tendon injury or a tiny little issue. But if you have someone who's looking and checking your horses so many times a day, knowing them, knowing their moods, knowing the way they getting into the mindset of the horse as well. Physically, it's a huge thing, because you'll see how robust and strong and how you may describe it as fitness, but it's well-being is the way I would describe it. A horse looking very, very well and on great terms with itself. And when you see that, you're filled with confidence. You know your horses are being looked after, and you can see. You only have to look at the longevity of some of the horses that have passed through that yard and how many races they've won, how much consistency they've shown, and how they still enjoyed running years and years after they first arrived there. And I think as an owner, those things become more and more important to you. Some people like different things, don't they? They like to, have a lot of fun and go for meals and play with a golf and do all that type of thing. And I think the more, there's something for everybody. Of course there is, but the more, as a competitive person and as someone who cares about the animals, you want to see them overachieving, achieve as much as they possibly can. You want to see them being cared for properly, and you want to see them looking well. And if they look well and they're in good spirits, they often run well, don't they?
Absolutely. I've got 2 more questions for you. Is that Trish? Sorry. 3 more questions for you. Trish wants me to... I can't I can't ask this. This is against YouTube guidelines. I can't say that word. Why did the champion trainer Paul Nicholls call you a "see you next Tuesday"?
Well, I think we touched upon this before. He couldn't even spell it right, could he, poor fella? We genuinely don't know. I'll go back to the political response I've said before. I'm a huge admirer of Paul Nicholls. Genuinely, he's, but Paul Nicholls, Nicky Henderson, they're the only ones keeping the Irish at bay at the moment, aren't they? And so we've got to appreciate them and enjoy them. I think, we've spoken a few times and we've had a good laugh about the whole thing. So I can only imagine he was in a funny mood that day.
Paul Nicholls in a funny mood? No, never.
Yeah, I'm not biting on that one.
We tried. I tried, Trish. I tried. Talk to me about Rubicon Racing.
So that was set up as a platform just to really sort of invite people along. I haven't got too many friends who've got 10 grands and 5 grands to buy little bits of horses, and when I'm in a situation where I'm reducing and cutting down my own individual spend on horses, I felt, well, look, it would be a waste if I stopped buying horses or stopped bringing them through. And so we set that up as an opportunity for people to perhaps get on board and have a little interest in a couple of the horses. Every horse that's gone through that has won. They've all done very well. The horse that won on Sunday at Doncaster looks a really exciting prospect going forward. So it's really just a way of me to. I buy the horses, I own the horses, and I invite people in to have a little bit of an interest in them with me and enjoy it. And it's not something I expect to become anything more than it is. Really, it just gives us another avenue to do something in horse racing and continue, perhaps doing what we've been doing, but on a smaller scale ourselves.
Yeah, that horse has some scope. He absolutely bolted up at Doncaster in a handicap chase. What's the plan with him going forward?
He won't be overfaced this season. He is only a 6-year-old now, so he won a nice race just at the end of last season when he stepped up in trip. He's just got a fantastic staying pedigree. I bought him off Mick Goff, who's a brilliant person to deal with. He was bought privately. We've always loved him. He's very athletic. And again, Richard's doing a great job with him. He's maturing nicely, but you could say he'd be a horse that could be aimed at the Grimthorpe or the Festival, but we just don't. We want these horses to have long careers, and we want them to continue to build gradually. So he won't be overfaced. He's qualified now for 2 championship races at the end of the season: the Red Rum and the Novices Championship. One's at Carlisle, one is at Warwick, I think, rather than Haydock this year. So he's more likely to run in one of those, maybe a couple of runs towards the end in the spring, but he won't be visiting any festivals or anything on those lines. He's next year, I think, if we look after him, he could certainly be developing into a whitbread horse or whatever the sponsors want to call it nowadays. And he's a proper staying pedigree, and to win over the trips he's been winning over as a 5 and 6-year-old suggests he could be. If we mind him properly, he could be running in big races going forward. So yeah, no fancy targets for him.
Okay, well, you can find out more at rubiconracing.co.uk, and you should very much be checking that out. Final question for you: how far does Fugitive win the Ryanair chase by?
Yeah, I don't know. I think a nose would be perfect. I think we've beaten Paul Nicholls in 2 photo finishes with riders on the Storm one at the Old Road Chase, and of course when we won the December Gold Cup, which winning, it's very dramatic winning by that type of margin. So let's maybe stretch it out to half a length or a length. That'd be perfect. We would genuinely think he'd have, he would, at 33 to 1, there's a parting shot. Help yourselves. Each way bet, he will be knocking on the door, and he's got plenty of improvement in him, and he'll be trained to the minute for the day. And a bit of rain would help his cause. So we'll see how that goes. But we'd be strongly fancying him. More importantly, we will really enjoy our day at the races that day. That's for sure. It's
impossible to predict the weather, but the Thursday at Cheltenham is becoming just a bog.
And
that's going to suit Tiapu. And we've already got George Gorman set to unleash a massive flood of water from a water tanker for the benefit of Tiapu in the stairs. But it'll help out our boy Fugitive as well. I think he's an insane price. He's an insane price going down through that race.
Yeah, look, he's a definite runner, and he loves the track. It's his course and distance. He'll be trained to the minute for the race, and he doesn't really have to find much improvement to be there or thereabouts. So we're really excited about him. It's again for us going into a race like that with a live chance. We are going to be absolutely loving it, and I encourage anyone to have a few quid on each way.
And the rules of National Hunt Racing in the 2023-2024 season is Gavin Sheehan has to win a big race at whatever meeting it is. So hopefully that's going to be Ryanair Chase 2024 for yourself. Carl, I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you so much.
And you, my friend.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your insight, and the very best of luck with Fugitive at Cheltenham 2024.
You're very welcome. Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.